Welcome to Near West Side, Milwaukee's finest community. A great place for you and your family to learn and grow, to have stability, and truly love the people. We strive to have the best place to live, to learn, to love. So we are called the neighborhood of neighborhoods. Please follow, like, and subscribe.
Hello, I'm Keith Stanley, Executive Director of the Near West Side Partners, and it's my pleasure today to have a very special guest with Milwaukee Connections. Born and raised, Derrick, in Milwaukee?
Yes, sir.
Derek Holland, who's now located in beautiful ATL, Atlanta. And Derek and I connected recently on a project we're looking at in the Near West Side. But Derek has a very fascinating, interesting route and how he got to Atlanta and how he got involved in doing housing development and development in general. Derek, can you tell the audience just a few lines about yourself? Who is Derek Holland?
Yeah, Milwaukee born and bred, Rufus King, 1986 graduate, go Generals. Kind of got into real estate actually in the early 90s, actually, when I graduated from University of Wisconsin. My dad told me not to, don't go out and buy the crazy tricked out apartment and the fly new whip, but save my change. I saved the money. My uncle allowed me to stay in the attic apartment for $200 a month as long as I saved my money. I guess the two of them kind of colluded. And I got a call from my dad one day, and he was like, "Hey, I found it." He gave me this address, told me to come meet him off of Burlock. And it was like a 5-6 unit apartment building. So that was the first property I bought. But he helped guide me through the whole thing. There was an elderly couple that had it. Their children didn't want it. They didn't want to get involved with it. And they were living in it, but they had all the stairs, and so we were able to get it at an attractive price point. But like I say, he helped guide me through the whole process, the purchase, getting everything leased out. All along, I was really kind of, a little kind of nervous. But then after he helped me get everything all leased up in that first month that everything was fully occupied, and I went and collected all the rents and I cut the mortgage check, and I look back and I'm like, oh, snap. Okay. This is what he's talking about. That's kind of my introduction into the real estate space came by way of that in my early 20s. But and then from there, kind of duplicated that, bought some additional assets and had my own little portfolio I was managing, so on and so forth, and doing portfolio and property and asset management on my own stuff, and then eventually continued to kind of continued in the real estate space, understanding some of the other opportunities on the development side, brokerage, so on and so forth, and then morphed into the development side that I'm on now.
So you're currently now in Atlanta. Let's talk a little bit about that transition. So you're, I guess, developing a real estate portfolio here in the city, and at some point decided to make a transition to Atlanta?
Correct. So in '99, I relocated, moved out of Wisconsin. At that time, it was just like, okay, let me just, I was in my late 20s. I was like, okay, I just need a minute. I'm trying to find myself. So, at that point, my rental properties where everything was all occupied, everything was cash flowing, put a property management company in place, and then decided, hey, I want to just kind of find some greener pastures and see what else is out here. Spent a little time out in California, but then ended up ultimately landing in here in Atlanta. I had a bunch of friends from high school, actually, a bunch of buddies from King, and folks that I knew from Milwaukee that were here, about 3 or 4 guys. Like, hey, if you want to come this way, came down. So the support was there. I continued to kind of do the some asset management here, and then did some construction work. And then in 2006, I served on the Zoning and Variance Commission for the county that I live in. And it was at that stage that I really started to understand and see how and what developers do. Because a lot of times we would have developers that were coming before us that were asking for variances, in some of the building codes and so on and so forth, kind of, can we reduce the setback, or, can we add or, reduce some of the egress and, permeable surfaces, things of that nature. So it was during that period that the light bulb kind of went off. So then when the market kind of tanked, I said, hey, let me try to figure out, I love this industry, but I want to kind of shift into a different position. Went to grad school, kind of so I could get my quantitative skills up to really kind of understand how the numbers kind of drive the deals and not necessarily the sticks and bricks. And then from there, kind of came back and have been on the development trajectory ever since. But that time on the construction and asset management, property management side, it helped very much, especially on the construction, because typically when you look at development projects, 80% of the budget is going to be tied up in construction. So, it helps to kind of at least have some understanding of how some of those processes work, understand how, scheduling, so on and so forth. Having spent some time in the trenches, it kind of helps a little bit versus if you were just a finance and numbers guy and then, getting a little nervous when, the cranes and stuff come out, which is like, okay, this is kind of a foreign space for you because it's, it's outside of the spreadsheets and stuff that, you're putting together performance and projections with.
Let's talk about then Trinity Partners. Tell me a little bit about Trinity Partners.
Trinity, we're a boutique development firm, primarily mixed use, urban core assets. A lot of times, many of our development deals may have some housing component, and there may be some commercial, could be some retail use. Right now, like we have a project that we're working on that's actually in the Florida market where it's mixed use, but it's basically it's anchored with healthcare, where we're bringing a hospital to a community there, and then we're bringing some medical office building and then other complementary uses that all kind of line up with the hospital that we're anchoring the site with. So it's a 3-phase process. But the first phase, what we're using to activate it, is potentially a 200-bed hospital that we're bringing to serve that community. Also, all the jobs and all the economic development that comes from that.
On the Near West Side, hospitals are very important. At one particular time in the Near West Side of Milwaukee, we had 7 hospitals. We now currently have only 1 left. And so we have a lot of housing and infrastructure that for those hospitals, but they're no longer there. We're doing some great job, I think, with reuse, but it's great to hear that you guys are able to bring a hospital. That healthcare is very important, especially to urban communities.
Correct.
I want to talk about some of your projects. And so we had a couple of slides about these projects, and we just walked through them and then talked about some things around these housing initiatives. So some of the commercial projects, you mentioned the one I think was in Florida. Any other projects that you can mention or that you can identify that you're working on or have worked on in the past?
Well, this one represents the Florida project. But actually our site plan is a little bit more developed than this right here. This is just kind of like the first phase that would be the hospital, the medical office building, and then there's about 300 units of multifamily affordable housing that comes to the site. But then in addition to that, we do have some industrial use. It's about 130 acres. So it's a very large site. And then where we're bringing an arts district. And the other thing I'm really excited about is, in addition to the hospital, because of the size of the site, and then as we were doing more of our research, initially I wasn't sure if these 2 uses would work together, but I'm finding that they've end up being more complementary, where we're doing some holistic healing and all that stuff. We're bringing that also to the site. I don't know if you're familiar or if any of your listeners are familiar with that, but there's a big push for that. But and a lot of that, it can, initially I was thinking that they would end up being adversarial and they really wouldn't be able to play well in the sandbox together. But as in doing my research, talking to a lot of people in the industry, that they actually now the thought is seeing how they both can complement each other, and realizing that, you know, the one common goal is just better quality of life for the people that they serve.
I'm with you right there. That quality of life is so important. I'm glad you have that holistic viewpoint too. I think, especially within different communities of color, the holistic has a lot of value. And if we can mix that with the actual healthcare providers, I think that can support a healthier community. Let's talk a little bit about the arts district. And that just in general, how do you see arts improving, affecting the lives of people that you develop for?
Well, I think the arts are very important. I think that typically, you know, early in my career, I heard this gentleman, he kind of compared development to high school. He said, development is like high school. And this is what he was saying. He said that if you think about it, the artsy kids, those are the cool kids. And everybody wants to follow suit after where the artsy kids go. But realizing by the time, you know, the artsy kids, they're always ahead of the curve. But then everybody else comes. And when they come, then the artsy kids are like, we don't want to be here no more. We want to go somewhere else. So, you know, but if you can appeal and follow, you know, the arts, and not to throw, you know, shine on one and shade on the other, because we need them all. We need them all. But, you know, but I think that the arts helps, you know, kind of give you, you know, healthy outlets, kind of, you know, sense of relief, not always just, you know, the hustle, the grind, so on and so forth. And, you know, so there was actually remodeling. There's a development in Miami, and I cannot remember the name of it now. It escapes me. Oh, Windward Walls. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I think so. I think I am. I think I've been there for a conference in that area, because they have a mural initiative, and they have murals everywhere. And I'm pretty sure
everywhere. Yep. And they have people coming from all over the world. They'll commission folks come every 6 months and kind of repurpose this wall or repurpose this one, you know. So, you know, and a lot of the urban art graffiti artists, you know, now, you know, that's kind of in fashion. So, you know, they're bringing them there, you know. I think like last time I was there, they had this huge Tupac mural, you know. So being able to, you know, take that arts district, but then weave F&B in there. So you got food and beverage, you know, to really create a really cool and unique space. And then, you know, just from that programming, now it becomes, you know, it definitely becomes a draw and a destination. So people will definitely, you know, it draws people there, and then they can see some of the other uses, you know. So it, you know, really just to, you know, kind of add some excitement and kind of switch up some things, and, you know, draw there again, you know, draw people's interest.
Well, that's good to hear. So we have, I like the acronym you put there, AF&B, arts, food, and beverage.
Yeah.
The Near West Side, we're always trying to figure that out, you know, and so we had the opportunity to win a grant, the Choice Neighborhood Transformational Plan grant, $1.3 million grant. A part of that grant allowed us to do murals, and we're excited about that because we're bringing great talent and highlight some really cool, unique spaces in the Near West Side. And also, we're always working on the food and beverages. We have some great restaurants and businesses, beverage businesses that we brought to the neighborhood. And so we're going to do more of that. So we have this cool, unique experience for people when it comes to some of the developments. I want to talk about, after we talk about this urban office, I want to talk about understanding affordable housing and what that looks like. So we have these cool elements, and then we want to figure out how do we play into affordable housing. Now, before we do that, though, tell me about this urban office space. Or is this similar to what you spoke about before?
No, this is different. This is a mock-up, and actually, this building is actually up and running and operating now, but I just didn't have an opportunity to get some of the current photos. This is the rendering of it, but it sits on the belt line here. So if you're familiar, or any of the listeners are familiar with the High Line in New York, which is a big trail, well, it has what they call the belt line. So it's an old rail line that goes around the whole city. And as that, you know, because walkability has become so important, and people really, you know, kind of are, you know, that's something that's just very desirable. So it's bringing walkability to a lot of, you know, communities that maybe, you know, otherwise would maybe be left out of some of the development. And this is on the south side of the city, which is traditionally, you know, traditionally African-American populated. And this neighborhood is called, it's the Pittsburgh community, which is a traditional, it was kind of railroad workers. I think it might have been a slave resettlement area of the city. If my history, if my recollection of the neighborhood history is correct, but don't quote me with that. At any rate, it was an old trucking yard, and the Casey Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of UPS, acquired the property. And they kind of reached out to my team and a couple other groups here to kind of come in and help kind of revitalize it. Now it's a 32 acre site. This was just the first phase, which is maybe about 10, 11 acres. The unique thing about it is that, like I said, it sits right there on the belt line. The back of it, the back right here, is kind of where the Beltline is. Now, the Beltline is about a $4 billion urban investment, that the urban development investment that the city is pushing. So, so if you're able to attach, next to that type of investment, that's always it's always good, and so this project here was, like I said, it's that the repurposing of that old I guess truck depot or something, so on and so forth. And there are a couple of different phases to it, and a big push on this was the economic development. So job creation was a big push. There was a strong intent from the construction, bringing some of the neighborhood folks in, allowing them to get opportunities to kind of work on the site, as well as the building itself. It's a kind of a maker space. So, you have entrepreneurs that may have outgrown, their garage or their living room table, but not necessarily, to the point that they're ready to go lease, 1,500 square feet of, class B or C, or A office space on a 5-year lease. So the intent here was to be able to help that transition and grow that entrepreneur. Hey, here's your intermittent step before you get ready to go into the deep end of the pool. Well, it's a little bit, it's a little bit deeper than working out of your house, but it's not, 12 feet just yet. So that's the purpose and intent here. And even in the leasing of the spaces, there's, kind of more kind of a mandate that, that the, so much of that space needs to be, filled by, folks that are local in that community.
I love that, man. I think that when you see this type of development happening, you definitely want to make sure people from the local community are involved in some aspect of that. So no, this is good. In fact, what I'm thinking there, I want to run through real quick with these other projects. I do have a couple questions for you. So let's run through your projects currently, then let's talk about, I'm asked these questions. I do want to say, was there a name associated with this project, that project?
Pittsburgh Yards.
Pittsburgh Yard, okay.
Pittsburgh Yards.
Let's see here. Look at this. I find this very fascinating, man. And I spent some time in Birmingham a couple years back, and I never forget, I went past, it was downtown Birmingham, and went past several storage containers, went inside. It was African-American business. It was amazing. He was selling a whole bunch of different things. I was buying candles and all this type of stuff. And I said, we need to have that. And then as I was doing the research on you, I said, oh my goodness, this is something that that you as a developer has spent some time working on and implementing. Can you talk a little about this mixed use container installation?
This is probably the crown jewel of our body of work of things that we've done. I'll tell you, the inspiration of this first came, I was in Vegas, had to be maybe like 5-6 years ago, and trying to figure out, hey, where are we gonna get something to eat? Well, found a Groupon for a restaurant that was off the strip, hopped in the taxi, and I don't know if you or any of your listeners have spent time in Vegas, but Vegas has a shipping container park, and it's very robust. And so that's when I thought it. And I was like, you know what? I want to do this in Atlanta. And so then, a couple of years later, by virtue of just, my network and just out and about, we ended up going into a public-private partnership with the city to go in and kind of erect this project here. So there's, we repurpose the shipping containers. This is for just how you always have a push on affordable housing. Well, also need affordable commercial space. You need that, it all, because in order to have healthy communities, we need a mixture of both. You need to have housing and you need to have businesses. Yeah, we have this great housing, but then, everything around is not affordable, or if people have to travel so far outside of the community to get some of their products and wares. Well, this is an opportunity to bring some affordable commercial spacing. On average, they're probably about 400 square feet, because it's about a 40 by 20 is the container. Now, the containers come in 3 different sizes, but what we did, it's a 40-foot container, but we split a couple of them, we split in half. So you have a tenant on one side, tenant on the other side. But then when you look at, because of the space, even if you're in, what we call main and main, and you're paying main and main lease rates, because of the size of the space, it still becomes a little bit more affordable. Because if you're, say you locate this somewhere where it's, $30 a square foot, $28 a square foot. So, that might not be something that, just anybody can just kind of roll into. But if we're like, it's only, 400, 200 square feet, then it could be a little bit more affordable. And then also, depending on how, a lot of times people think that instantly it's going to be cheaper. Well, it's not necessarily cheaper, but it does allow you to kind of get the product up and running much faster. You figure, compared to traditional stick build, the runway to completion, you might be able to get it completed, maybe if stick build says it's going to take 12 months for something, this might be able to get done in 8 months. So it allows you to get the product up and running, is revenue generating faster, so on and so forth. There are a lot of nuances with it, because this type of building structure and material, a lot of municipalities are not familiar with it. So, trying to get permitted, trying to get zoning, all those types of things. A lot of times, oftentimes people look at it and, hey, it's a great solution for affordable housing, which I do agree with that. But what we found is that from that housing piece, a lot of times the zoning categories, they don't reflect spaces of this size. Because, you figure if you got R1, R2, some of your traditional zoning categories, well, a lot of times they have a minimum square footage. So that minimum square footage might be, 1,800, 1,200 square feet. But then something that does not necessarily fit into that square footage. So then now they have to go back and say, okay, we need to, add another zoning category, to be able to reflect this smaller space. But there again, just like with the affordable retail space, it allows you to maybe folks that otherwise couldn't afford to live on Prospect and Farwell, just Milwaukee's sake, but
you said something though, Derek. You said one of my favorite terms, we use this quite a bit in there with side, the 3 Ps, the public-private partnership, working with the city on that. I would assume the city of Atlanta. What role did the city play in helping and putting this vision together, helping with this vision?
The city was, of course, they were very helpful on the zoning, but then also this was all part of a transportation grant from the federal government. So we were able to kind of come together. They were able to go and kind of get the funding, because this building now, since then, because this project is probably, Keith, I say it's probably about 3 years old now.
Wow.
Since then, now, there are funders that are in the, private sector where you can, put together one of these and say, okay, I want to do a multifamily, housing deal with containers. But then, because it was so new, a lot of times the finance and financial partners, they weren't really sure how to underwrite it, and of course, folks on the finance side, they're going to be very conservative. So they're like, well, let's let the public sector kind of lead the way, iron out all the kinks, and then private sector will kind of come behind it.
That's very interesting, man. I'm excited about that. We got some questions here, but before we get to these questions, I do want to go to this idea of, and it's under the whole entire affordable housing issue. We talked a little bit about it before we started, but you know, the Wisconsin Policy Forum (WPF) came out last week with the stat that for the city of Milwaukee, I think it's like actually the county, Milwaukee County, we are 40,000 units under of where we need to be regarding housing. And what got me really interested in your story was about the containers. The city of Milwaukee, we have a lot of land that is underutilized. So I just want to get your thoughts as a developer on how you see the development community responding, the community itself responding, or even the government responding on addressing affordable housing. Is it containers? Is it tax credit, better tax credit deals? What would be some of the key components of getting where we need to be when it comes to affordable housing in our city?
Well, I think that definitely being able to help offset costs. So, if you're looking at tax credits, of course, that's generally the first tool that people will go to try to figure out how to make these deals work, because production costs, they're not going down. Especially like right now on the heels of COVID, lumber costs are triple what they were pre-COVID. A sheet of plywood that used to be $9, $8 is almost $28, $30 now. So say if you're trying to build a house and you have to wrap that whole house in plywood, you can imagine what that's going to do to that cost. Not let alone the framing costs and so on and so forth. So being able to come up with these different building materials, of course, that always helps figuring out how to reduce costs. Now with like the containers, as well as like, there's modular homes, things of that nature. The thing that, as far as with on the government and the municipality side, trying to figure out how to support that effort would be, what I know from what we experienced, is being able to have some type of uniformed inspections. Because part of the saving is to be able to have stuff done, as much things done off-site, and then you're delivering this product and you're dropping it in place. But if, say like with the containers, if we're having the fabrication, all the openings, all that's done, but then, we have to bring it on site to do the plumbing, and then we still have to wait for the inspector to come out for the plumbing rough and then plumbing final, as well as with your electrical and so on and so forth, then, that kind of adds to that cost, and you end up losing some of what you would be able to, some of the savings that you would otherwise be able to get, as well as probably slows down your delivery time. But, in some of the states that we're aware of where, this has been successful, they may have like a uniform state kind of inspection process, where the inspection process, for the most part, is being able to is done off-site. Now, cuts into maybe some of the local revenues. So I don't know how the state and the local will be able to kind of balance that out, from a revenue generation perspective. But generally, it's a statewide uniform inspection process that would help definitely be able to kind of help ease and kind of bring that this types of variety, type of variety of building materials and housing options. And I think that what I do really like about the containers is, especially as you have neighborhoods that are changing, and to be able to protect some of the folks that are current residents, especially the elderly, being able to provide maybe a shipping container that can serve as an auxiliary dwelling unit and help them kind of, here's an additional stream of revenue that you can kind of bring on board to help you to afford the increase that will come in your taxes. So
I like what you said. You actually answered my question, because my question is like, what is the role for shipping, for the role for housing shipping containers, or however you want to say it, shipping containers that work that provide housing, and you're saying that can provide additional revenue, especially for older families who may see increase in taxes. Any other items you say? How do you see? What is the value add for communities who are looking? You know what? We need more housing. Shipping containers could be the answer. What's the value add when we look at these shipping container housing units?
Well, going back to the example, what I was kind of getting at with the example I gave was when you have, which I don't think that gentrification is a bad thing. It's the displacement. You need gentrification. Gentrification is that's the change that comes. It's because without gentrification, you're living in a neighborhood that has rent-controlled housing. And in rent-controlled housing, that's great initially, but if you're living in a property that has rent-controlled housing and the rent has been, stifled at, 1999 rent rolls, but you have 2020, 2021 repairs that need to be done, well, there's not a whole lot in there to be able to pull from to do the repairs. So that being able to, we need to have some of the changes come to the communities, but I think that being intentional about, preserving and maintaining the culture and the identity of the community through the residences, especially our elderly residences, because as we stand here today, we're standing on their shoulders and their back. So, we definitely don't want to push them, just push them to the side because they can't afford to keep their property taxes. With the rise in the property taxes as the values go up around them, you know what I mean?
We'll go through these questions quickly on the screen, but then I got some other, I want to say, hot takes for you. So how can communities support developers?
Well, I think that most importantly, is, understanding, well, as a developer, I think that it's important that when I come into the community, that I take the time to introduce myself to the community properly. I take my time to understand, what the protocols are in that community, understanding where the embedded natural assets are in the community and doing programming around that. So, and then part of that is also, my team, we look to try to, kind of include the community and get some input so we can try to include some of that input in the programming, because the success of the development is kind of a symbiotic relationship. That development needs, and we understand, or our philosophy is that we want that development to become embedded to the community where it becomes a community development. It's not even ours. The community, they've identified it and they take ownership of it. So then, years from now, when we're no longer here, it's still a thriving asset within that community. But that all comes from, properly introducing, the development team, the development concept, all of that to the community appropriately, and properly. And I understand, because you have a lot of, because we, in our work, we do a lot of urban, development. So you have communities that may have, they've had bad experiences with developers. And I get that, but as we do it, being sensitive to the community, but then also, it would help, as community understands, there's a wish list that we have and we want to see your wish list. Now, we might not be able to check the boxes on all of that because we still have to be able to, secure the funding to be able to make this, to make this dream come true. So, being able to, being open to the give and take and the compromise that's needed on both sides. So I guess when you say, how can community support developers? I think it's probably, it works both ways. Also, how can developers support communities as well too? So it's both just being sensitive to, some of the, intrinsic components that are crucial to both sides in order for the development to be successful.
So glad you say that, man. What's your take on COVID-19 and its impact on development in the communities?
Well, I think that COVID is definitely going to impact us from a space requirement perspective. I think you'll definitely see more outdoor spaces. I think you'll probably see, your interior spaces will probably be more strategically positioned, so that folks will continue to, in this social distancing, kind of a mindset that's coming out of COVID. Even though as we get on the other side of the vaccination, I think that there still will be, kind of a newfound kind of acceptable, kind of spacing, that will probably adhere to for a while, even after we get to, herd immunity, which is, I guess, what they're trying to do once everybody gets vaccinated. So I think that from the development perspective, it really will be, impacted on the design and planning, phase and portion as we're going through development. Like I said, get more some of the outside spaces, exterior spacing, and so on and so forth.
This is helpful. I'm taking notes, so when I'm talking to developers, I can say, "This is what you need. This is what you need." Before we get to the future of Trinity, I'm gonna do the hot takes. So I want to jump into that right now.
Sure.
You kind of hit upon it. What's your advice for developers, man? And if you don't mind, knowing that you have insight for both the Milwaukee market and the Atlanta market, what would be your advice for developers who are trying to do development during this time?
Well, I mean, development is always tricky, because as the developer, basically you're the quarterback, so, you have to have early on, one of the things that was, kind of shared with me, basically development is, you got 5 components, you get finance, construction, design, legal, and marketing. So, understanding how all those 5 pieces kind of tie together to make a successful development. Typically, as a developer, he might have expertise in 1 or 2, and then being able to get, really strong consultants on the team that will kind of pick up for the areas of expertise that he or she may not be proficient in. And then, it's all about, just continuing to massage those relationships, because access to capital is always crucial. And then, being sensitive to, the relationships with the capital partners, being a good fiduciary, understanding what types of asset classes or types of developments that they may feel most comfortable with. And then trying to, meet the needs, from that point. And then also, you always have to be cognizant and befriending to, the leadership, so all the municipal leadership. So you're, being able to solve both of those problems. Our philosophy is always, our approach is we do good, but then we also do well. So we can.
I'm gonna ask this question, Derrick, but feel free to sanitize or bypass this question if you want. Okay. Any generic differences, and I say generic so you have to do no name calling or anything, any differences you see when it comes to working with government as far as in the city of Milwaukee or Atlanta that you had experience with or that you recognize? Because I know things is always changing, but any insight on how you feel about the differences between working and where you currently are in Atlanta now and then working in the city of Milwaukee?
Government is government, I think that you just have to make sure, got to make sure that you understand and know what you're doing. You know your problem. You've done your homework, and then also just understanding that, from government perspective, it's about how it contributes to the tax revenue, and is it something that it will help generate votes. Basically, kind of as a developer, we're delivering this product, and then I guess the leadership can build on that. It's something that's embraced. It's kind of like, we're just kind of sitting in the background at the press conference, and hey, commissioner, run with that all day long.
I do have to admit, I'm always surprised because I tell those guys when I'm talking to developers, I said, I don't need a pretty building. As the community guy, as the guy that's working within the community, is taking all the phone calls, working with the aldermen, working with our institutions and residents, they're going to, when something goes wrong, we don't care how pretty the building is, but if there's loitering, panhandling, those urban issues that have not been thought about or addressed, that doesn't help me out. And then people say, Keith, you promised that this developer would do this, and now we're upset with you. And the developer goes, I'm out. I done made my developers pay. I'm like, so I tell the developers, work with me. So when we're working with the local alderman, we're working with other city officials, that they all understand that this is more than just a pretty building. That's important to me. So I'm glad you say that.
Right. One of the things, let me just say this, kind of build on what you just said, is what we try to do is, as we're approaching it, we have the geographic boundaries of the development, the parcel that you're working on. But then as we incorporate the programming, maybe we'll say, okay, say it's a mixed use project and we have multifamily housing. Well, if we can, as we perform of the project, maybe we might say, okay, well, we know that, the neighborhood school, maybe there's that we can support that school. If it's maybe a year or two, we can underwrite and have a breakfast program, or we can, some type of after school programming or something like that for 18 or 24 months to kind of help jumpstart. And, but what happens is with that, if we're able to get the numbers accordingly, to be able to kind of take some of that programming, and that programming goes off, outside of the parameters of the development, but we end up getting it back, because maybe, those might be the children of some of the tenants that live in our property. So, it helps undergird what we're doing, because now, maybe there used to be a lot of tardiness. Well, now it's like, hey, get to school, you don't have to worry about, because breakfast is there. So mom and dad get out, they get to work, they work on time, they're focused at work. So, now they can focus on what they need to do at work. The children are, their child, was able to get a nutritious meal. And, and then we were also able to, make sure that, the rents were collected and paid accordingly as well. So then we're able to answer to our financial partners, appropriately, and, yield whatever the committed returns were supposed to be from the developer too. Now it's kind of tricky, you got to, because it all starts initially with the land basis points. So that acquisition price has to be proper. It can't, so you have to make sure that when you look at your capital stat, that land cost isn't more than, maybe 18%, 18 to 20% of, of your numbers, so that, everything else does not get thrown off. But if you're able to get that land basis point a little bit lower, then that's where, hey, we can afford to maybe do some of these other, programming ideas to be able to help and undergird the whole community.
And Derek, I would say that for me, once again, as the guy working within the community, even I would say a developer's face and developers' involvement goes a long way. Yes, money always helps. It'd be great to be able to do things to support local organizations and, commission a mural or help with a cleanup. But I would also encourage our developers, specifically our developers of color, that just being a face in the community, being involved. It's always great. It warms my heart to see a developer who, I'm coming to your cleanup. You guys got a cleanup scheduled this weekend. I'm gonna come to the cleanup. Like, wow. I mean, to me, that is such a value, because it knows that we're in it together. I'm in it with you. Yes, I'm right here with you. Exactly. Yeah. And so a lot of times that's just a difficult thing for us, at least here in the city of Milwaukee, because I know it's difficult for our developers, especially our African-American developers, that I know there's a lot pulling on them. But we try to encourage them to get involved in some type of way, because it helps the organization, it helps the community out. And it's not just a pretty building, because a lot of times we do have pretty buildings, but then we have all these social issues around it that is still there after the pretty building has been developed. So, well, just two more questions. To your point, go right ahead. Yeah, I think to your point, presence, it's like, okay, maybe you can offset and spend some dollars here and there, but it's that presence to show that, hey, I'm sensitive to some of the issues here, or I'm in the trenches with you. You're right.
a long way.
I'm telling you, man, I know it's a value add for me, man. Two more questions for you as we begin to wrap this up. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm hoping that you could put a different hat on this time around. And I want to come from the home buyer and the person who's looking for a place to stay perspective. What advice would you give a person who's either trying to buy or a person who's trying to find affordable housing? Any advice you would give that? And just that you know, I'm asking this question because I'm being a little greedy here because I'm thinking about my own self as I transition to looking at buying a home. It's a tough market right now. Any thoughts you would share as far as people who are interested in either buying or renting and what they should look out for when it comes to development opportunities?
Well, I guess, the developer, well, I guess when you well, I think, let me say this. When, in terms of the purchase and acquisition, and especially if you're kind of going into emerging communities that maybe were otherwise, disregarded, and now there's renewed interest in those communities. Typically, you will have different tools and different incentives that may be sitting out there with the cities or something like that to be able to draw, home ownership to those communities. So, I would definitely look to see, okay, hey, what are some of the, if it's down payment assistance, if there are grant dollars that are available, that's depending on your, an individual's demographics or where they are income wise, because, housing costs are, they're escalating, but to try to help kind of offset some of that, a lot of the cities may have, funding that may be provided, from the philanthropic community as well as from the federal government that have rolled down, so definitely being able to try to, see what may be out there. I think like here in Atlanta, I think at one point, the Urban League had a really strong push in different programs and incentives and tools that they had that the city didn't even have. So, being able to look and see, if it's, it escapes me now. I'm trying to think of who are the folks for 211 United Way, looking at, looking at those types of entities. If it's United Way, if it's Urban League, some of the other larger philanthropic organizations, they may have something, in the local markets that may also lend itself in conjunction with what the government might be trying to do to kind of help kind of ease the burden and kind of bring the affordable back into the housing.
We also, the Riverside Partners, we offer $3,000 to $5,000, up to $5,000 in home ownership incentives, specifically covering down payment costs for people who are interested in Riverside. And it's been successful. We've gotten people to take advantage of it. I know I said only two questions, but I got just one more throw in there.
No problem.
You mentioned something earlier, and you talked about the gentrification aspect and how gentrification is not bad. And I totally agree with you. It's the displacement. I just want to pick your brain on this while you have the time. Hopefully you have the time.
Sure.
When it comes to displacement, what would you say? How can communities protect themselves against displacement that may come with gentrification?
I think that the best way is educating property owners. If I'm not sure what the reach is of your organization, Keith, but maybe, it's organizations such as yours that are in the community, being able to educate, some of the homeowners in the community. Hey, these are, this is what's happening. This is what is to come. Now, this is how this might affect your values. Now, you're going to have some people that they're going to want to go, and that's fine. As long as they understand, okay, well, and if you want to sell, let me kind of explain to you, what's happening. And so that if you do sell, make sure that you're getting, an appropriate amount for your property. Just, they don't want to stay there anymore. Maybe they, had some bad experiences or what have you. Okay, fine. But at least if you're going to sell, let's make sure that, you kind of understand and you properly value, your property is properly valued in your mind, so you understand what your number needs to be. And then as well, if folks that want to stay, then being able to look at, okay, how to offset some of those increases in those property taxes. Like I said, with those AUDs, those auxiliary dwelling units, ADUs, I'm sorry, or as some of the new interest comes, well, maybe we can have, you can provide some type of job training programs or something like that. So then, maybe the skill sets of the folks in the community, now their skill sets have become enhanced and increased. So then now they can go out and get more gainful employment, more livable wage employment to be able to afford to stay in the communities or in the house that's been in the family for that family house that's been, been with the family for 2 or 3 generations.
I totally agree with you. I get a little hesitant, or that's not the word I'm looking for, but a little discouraged, Derek, when I hear people, this narrative that, has been pushed upon our community, specifically communities of color, about gentrification. Because I think that, to your point, I think you made an excellent point. Sometimes people do want to sell. And to your point, I wrote it down. If you educate yourself, you can probably get a really good price.
Right.
And you can pay off bills and move to another community. But to say this allowing things to happen to us, that bothers me, because it's like, no, we at some point we got to take a responsibility and say, listen, okay, the neighborhood looks like it's changing. I got to decide whether I want to stay or go. If I decide to stay, there's consequences and things that come along with that. If I decide to go, there's consequences. But we should have that power, that control, the autonomy to make the decision ourselves, and not say things are being done to us all the time. It's my humble opinion. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I agree with you. It's a map, but I just kind of feel like, empowering folks so they can stay in control.
Yep.
Not to the point where, you're just subject to, the whim and prayer of the market, what's happening around you.
That's right. I totally agree with that.
So like I said, it's just all about education, and not to create more work for you and your organization, but, you guys are, community, community groups such as yours are, the people, there's a trust that's been developed, and all of that, comes into play when you're trying to explain to, folks in the community what's happening, when it's a trusted voice that they go, okay, well, all right, listen to what they're saying, versus someone from the outside that's trying to explain it. The message gets registered totally different.
I think you're absolutely right. We have those relationships. We pride ourselves on developing platforms, Derek, for everyone in the community to connect. So we have the landlord compact. So all our landlords, again, we have quite a few of them. They connect once a month. We have resident meetings. We have school meetings, church meetings, and things of that nature. So we make it a point to bring everybody together at some point to have a discussion and to share information. I think you make an excellent point, though, of having that control. I think we tried to educate residents and community stakeholders on their side to listen. As we want to improve our community, grocery stores, other amenities, coffee shops, bookstores, that we have to be mindful that these amenities other people want. And so we want to work with our residents to figure out, listen, if we're concerned about displacement, let's focus on that now. And so we're starting to have those conversations as we begin to continue to improve the community. And there's been people I stand on the shoulders of for the past 10, 15, 20 years who've done an excellent job with bringing in new business, and we're following that tradition. So the last question I have for you, Derrick, is your thoughts about the future of Trinity, and where do you see yourself? I would imagine there's some opportunity here in Milwaukee, there's opportunity in Atlanta, there's opportunity in Florida and Illinois. How do you see yourself growing the firm, or direction the firm is going in?
Well, Milwaukee is always going to be my first love, because that's where it all started, So I'd love to be able to take what I've seen and done and the experiences to be able to bring them and share them with, you know, the development community there in Milwaukee, you know, being able to, there again, do good, do well, you know, and I think that it can be done. You know, it's just a matter of just how we approach it and, you know, getting the right partners to the table and, you know, listening and hearing what the stakeholders have to say and so on and so forth. So the future, I'd love to be able to come back and, you know, and do some work there, you know, on some of those same mean streets that I used to catch the 62 on Capitol Drive going to school in the morning.
Oh, yes.
When it was, you know, when it was 8 degrees outside and, you know, 4 feet of snow.
Right there with you, man. I caught the 30. Was it the 30 to 31, whatever Sherman was, to the 62 to
The 62.
King.
Yeah, the 62.
Did that for many,
the 30.
years.
Yeah, I remember all those bus routes. It's 70.
And
The
Derrick,
one that ran on 76th Street going out to Northridge. I remember.
Yep, 36.
Times.
That's right. That's right. The Metro Link.
Yeah.
Derrick, man, I really appreciate your time, man. Thank you. It was great to be able to connect with you. I know we're looking at trying to do some things here, and it was just great to know that we got people all across this country doing stuff. And so it's great that you're in Atlanta doing some great stuff. I'm sure there's probably going to be some questions and things that people may want to reach out to you for. So we'll make sure we connect them. But thank you for this opportunity, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, that's it, Near Side partners, Near Side resident community members. We will get this out. And if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll make sure we get them over to Derrick. And hopefully we maybe get Trinity doing work in the Near West Side. Thank you.